Just want to do a quick mic check. Let me know if you can hear me, and then we'll get things started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. My name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards, and I'm a senior world designer who works on Lord of the Rings Online. We're coming up on our 20th anniversary next year, and, well, I can't say that I've been here all 20 years. I've been pretty close to it. But that's not what we're thinking about or talking about right now. This week, we are here to continue our travels through the various rivers of Middle-earth in what we are calling the last rivers of Rovanion for this stream. Last stream, we went through the remaining bigger rivers that were there to explore in Eriador. We're going through Rovanion now. There are a lot of rivers in Rohan itself, so I'm going to try to speed run through those and then take us up into Ered Mithrin, into Dale and Northern Mirkwood, as well as into Ironfold to round things out. I know a lot of people are excited about the news that we announced over the weekend with the Wolves of Mordor expansion pack, redacted of redacted. We can now say it, Wolves of Mordor. So I know a lot of you will have some questions about that. But for right now, we're going to try to stay as focused on this. There are some things I can talk about here and there about that, but we're going to save a lot of that kind of information for more proper preview streams and whatnot next week for our We Have a Cave Troll stream. Orion and I are going to talk a little bit about what was announced and the details that go along with that, kind of making it a live stream version of the presentations that were at Gen Con and the articles that have been released thus far. But for this stream, we're here starting out in Wellinghall at the far end of the rivers in Rohan. So let me bring up the map real quick so we can see where we are. So here we are all the way up in Wellinghall. We're going to work our way down through the Entwash and kind of wind our way down through probably to about, I want to say this point. And then we'll flip over into some of the other rivers and whatnot that go through Rohan, kind of working our way west to east. And then finally just kind of moving our way all the way down here to areas we've been to before. We are skipping a lot of the other Rovanian regions that we've been in before because I covered a lot of those rivers pretty extensively when I was doing the Great River, the Anduin stream series, which took us through a bunch of them. So for this one, we're going to just focus on these smaller rivers right now. I'm going to try to buzz through them pretty quickly. So hopefully, not that fast. Let's go here. And we'll get our things going. Please feel free to ask any questions you have in chat. Remember, this is a world design focused stream. So if you do have questions that are related to world design, related to housing, what goes into making the landscape, I'm happy to do my best to answer them. Anything outside of that, things like monster play, class balance, what survival instincts are, I'm not going to be able to answer those questions. I'm going to try to get as far as I can in this. We may have to break this up into two because I do have a meeting about neighbors at 3, so in about 55 minutes that I need to jump out for. But otherwise, we're going to keep rolling. So here we are starting out in Wellinghall. Honestly, this is one of my favorite waterfalls that we have in game. It's so light and sprinkly. It doesn't feel like a torrent falling down on your heads. It is just water kind of just streaming down, which is very distinct, I feel, from most of the other waterfalls that we have in the game, some of which are a byproduct of the age of the game, and some of them are just heavy. You can see these guys here. These are pretty heavy waterfalls. And this one seems to be flickering a little bit. There might be some stuff, maybe 2 versions of that asset on top of each other. But yeah, we're working our way down these rivers. And I am at the normal casual stroll pace, which is more of just a really fast run but we'll get where we're going. Alrighty. I've mentioned before, I always love going through rivers and whatnot, or not rivers, forests and whatnot, especially while we're building things. One of the things that I'm excited about for the expansion pack is getting a chance to do kind of another like mountainous forest region, which is what Nanogel is. A little bit different. It is not as big treed, we'll say, as something like Fangorn or Lothlorien is, but it is something that I'm really excited about finishing up building. All right. See, while I'm swimming down the river, I'll take a look at chat and see what other questions might be popping up. I remember playing through these areas and running through like on level, and I feel like the one thing that always frustrates me whenever I'm running through an area like this is I'm running through whether it is bog lurkers or wood trolls. I'm just running, and then all of a sudden I am halted immediately through a route. It's a bit disruptive. Alrighty, another waterfall coming up, and down we go. I'm gonna see if I can run along the shore, because that'll help us speed things along a little bit faster. Not that I want to get through all of this with you all too quickly, but running is much faster than swimming. Maybe I'll do one of my next streams will be like the lakes of Middle Earth, in which I just slowly swim around each lake. Even them being the first and foremost, of course. And down we go. I do like the ambience of this area with the light shafts and whatnot and the fog. All right. Yes, Thangdrim, you're correct. That was Wellinghall, as I mentioned. Hirok says, are there any plans to make areas with heroic names in Rohan, since Kingstead, Westhold, Ease of Fangorn are now regions? I'm not sure what you mean by that. If you mean like changing the names of things to be more Rohirric in origin, perhaps, that would be probably something better suited for a suggestion or a request, either on Discord or something submitted through our JBug system. Oh, it's getting to be late out. I'm going to need to change. Let's see. There we go. Get a little bit of extra daylight in here, since I had this running for a while and was sitting in Wellinghall. And it's like, okay, midday when I started. Now it's getting late. Let's get up over this. I do like how dense this feels and the silhouettes that these trees make. It feels so good. Feels so good. My biggest issue with forests like this is always, like, I love the canopy, but when trying to do placement or make maps for these kinds of regions, whether it's like placing monster spawns, building monster camps, the canopy always makes it hard, whether it's the trees getting in the way or you just can't zoom out at a distance to see what you need to place, where you need to place, because the canopy is there. For Nanogel, I was thinking about trying to find ways to mitigate that, but I think at the end of the day, the trees that we created for the region don't exhibit the same kinds of concerns or issues that a forest like Fangorn has. Remember when we first built these regions, in the first version of Rohan East, Eastern Rohan, we had to like figure out how we were going to handle the impassables for all of these regions, because we knew that Western Rohan was bordering right up against it, and how do we show that Western Rohan exists without allowing players to get into it, and also without building a gigantic wall to block visibility. I think Fangorn was easier to achieve that because it's a rushing river, or in this case right now somewhat lazy river, running through that kind of region. And so it makes sense that it could cut through stuff. But once you start getting out more into the fields of Rohan, we had to effectively build a lot of the terrain for Western Rohan as part of our effort in building Eastern Rohan. Um, and then I remember, like, I think one of the last things that I had done working on the expansion pack before I went off to projects unnamed, uh, prototypes unnamed, was doing a like sort of plausible pass on all of the all of the Western Rohan boundaries and putting in like big reeds to block visibility through all of it. Um, all right, we've emerged from Fangorn, and we are now looking out over Rohan proper, all of the fields and dales. These are always fun to make too. These were handmade, erosions. Um, you know, we don't have any specific tool that's like an erosion tool. I know a lot of more modern game engines and whatnot, their level editors and whatnot come with a tool that can help you simulate erosions. And a lot of what we have is just kind of point to point manipulation. Some smoothing, raising, lowering, and whatnot. So it takes like a creative use of different different brushes in that manner to kind of combine together to build that erosion by hand. We do a lot of that erosion now using, at least as a first pass, using, World Machine and Photoshop to then import that height map in. But this region was built kind of in between our experimentations with World Machine and then taking a break from it because the person who was kind of spearheading that had left the company, left Turbine at the time. And then we kind of had to rediscover it and recreate the processes that we used to move forward with that. All right, let me jump up over this. Am I going to land? Yep, stuck landing. Go me. Alrighty, we're making our way. These are always great vistas. I think probably the hills rise a little bit higher than realistically they ought to, but it definitely helps for navigating through the region when you can look out in the distance and see towns and whatnot up on top of higher than they probably should be, but appropriately so, bluffs. Hirok asks, why are the new regions all part of territories instead of just being zones? I'm guessing this question means why are the Wolves of Mordor regions that we're making, Heladris, Parthravas, and Draugarth, why are they in a new zone, a new region, Region 7, instead of incorporating them into Region 4 or Region 5? And the answer to that is space and extensibility. We want to be able to build in a way that will sort of future-proof us. And unfortunately, Gondor, Mordor, that region, both Gondor and Mordor are not future-proofed particularly well. In part because a lot of what was built then also had copies and copies and copies. Region 2 has so many copies of Helm's Deep. Region 3 has so many copies of Minas Tirith. Region 4 has different copies of Gondor and Mordor in it, and those copies don't really help us when it comes to expanding the landscape. And in order to expand the landscape, we would either have to move stuff that was placed, unfortunately, which we don't want to do because that comes with a ton of additional work associated with it. If we were to move, a copy of Minas Tirith or move a copy of, Gondor, all of the content that would be in there would have to be moved, and all of that content would then subsequently have to be tested. And in order to future-proof us, we've sat down and we've figured out where the optimal place for these new regions or these new zones, these new regions would be in the territory of Region 7. And then that allows us room to expand. That gives us room to expand in the future, especially in the directions that we're planning to go. It allows us spaces to connect more easily. So we could connect region, or sorry, did I say Region 7? I mean Region 6. Sorry. We could connect Region 6 to Region 5 in certain ways if we wanted to, if we were ever to go like down into Khand. So, where we've positioned the regions for Region 6 makes sense to then easily move back into Region 5 if we were ever to build Khand, and the same like whenever we start expanding out into Rune. It is tricky because, like I said, we haven't really done a particularly great job of future-proofing ourselves, protecting us from ourselves in the past. And we really want to make sure that we do as good of a job of that as we can going forward. All right. Thangdrim says, has returning to Mordor been refreshing for region development as well as building slightly smaller and fewer regions? So I think returning to Mordor it's something that we've been thinking about for a while. It was one of the directions that we were thinking about prior to starting our campaign through Harad. So it was like, do we go through Mordor? Do we go through Harad? Do we go some other direction? Those were all... I can't go through there. All right, time to rocket jump up and over. So those were all kind of places that we were thinking, this is where we'll go next. And, Harad obviously won out. I think the team itself was just looking for and excited about opportunities to go somewhere new. Go somewhere where we could stretch our legs creatively and artistically, and returning to another region that we've already kind of built before and expanding on it didn't give us that ability to be creative in that way. So that's kind of how we were feeling about it. I think we're definitely excited about it, and we are ready to jump at the opportunity to build more in it. But I do think that it was something where we were just like, we want to do something new. We can wait on coming back to Mordor until we've kind of scratched that itch. And having scratched that itch, now here we are. As far as smaller regions go, I think one of the things I've talked a little bit about when it comes to building out what we built out for Harad was really wanting to show it as a region that is a rival of Gondor. And one of the ways to do that was to build it big. We tried some experiments in the concept of kind of main path and side path for regions, and trying to work in a way that our content flow sticks you to the main path through the region while still having plenty of room on the side. And so we were figuring out new development methodologies for landscape that allowed us to build big and build fast. But I do think that, we in general were all just kind of ready for scaling it back a little bit, having the regions be a little bit more intimate. and also making the regions a little bit more physically complex than they were when it came to something like Harad, where a lot of that open space is not necessarily super complex. All right, where am I? Let me see where I am first. All right, let's go. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go next. I don't want to do that one. I want to do this one. I have all of my notes in Notepad right now, so I'm trying to remember what order I'm doing things in. Don't mind me. Don't mind me. All right, is this where I wanted to be? No. This is not where I want to be. I want to be... Why don't we go here? We're going to skip a river, because I did not write down the location for the one river that I wanted to go to. So we are going to go here to Gapholt in the Stone Deans, which is also a really nice waterfall coming down out of the mountains. And lots of reeds. Sorry about that, everyone. Let's see. I saw full trees and dead trees in Nan Ogle. Will that be something that changes with night or something, or was it just two separate locations? So we have a whole new set of foliage, trees, frills, bushes, etc., that are coming in for Nan Ogle. The goal with Nan Ogle is to have kind of two types of forests in the region, lower elevation, higher elevation, as well as burnt variants on all of those for places where it makes sense for us to burn some of that forest down. It is adjacent to Heladris, which is a very volcanically active region, and Nan Ogle itself is intended to be a region that is we'll say verdant in large part because of its proximity to the rich volcanic ash from Heladris and even from Mount Doom falling upon it and enriching it. All right. So coming back to Herok's question, let me find it again. He says, they say, I meant how like Lone Lands has Ananlos, Haragmar, Harloweg. The Rohan areas are very large in comparison and now full-on regions from what I saw. So I think some of that is a byproduct of how those regions were built. Rohan in general, the areas of Rohan are large, in large part because of the expectation that you are on your war steed moving through the region. So those areas are larger because of that, to give you more space to run, and so therefore the area designations for those are also a bit larger. I think one of the things that I've worked with and talked with the team about since I've come back was, particularly in Rohan, this was challenging for navigational purposes and for mapping purposes, where you have a whole region that is just one area file, area designation, one name, and that makes it hard to navigate. The Blackroot Vale is just this big sprawling massive area, and so I do try to make sure as we're setting up our new regions going forward that there are subdivisions within them. So you have the region of Heladris, and then within that there are three smaller sub area designations within it to help with player navigation, to help with mapping and all of that stuff, so you have a better sense of your place in the world. Still not as small as the areas in like the original world, because those regions are just smaller in general. And a lot of those designations were a byproduct of our landscape creation processes at the time, and were often very associated with the server boundaries within the map as well. And we started the game, we had very specific, narrow spaces for our server boundaries that we had to make sure that we fit things into. And so very often, zone boundaries, the server boundaries, and the boundaries of the area often kind of lined up with each other, whereas, how we build now, those are a little bit bigger. And then we leave room for subdivision that doesn't incorporate name changes as part of that. Druid's Fire says, Fangorn is supposed to be creepy. Until Northern Mirkwood came out, it was the creepiest, most Halloweenish area in the game. Very true, though. I will say, I think there are elements of the Old Forest that hit creepier than Fangorn does, at least for me. All right, let's quick pause with a view to scroll through chat so I can catch up with it, because I've been talking a lot, and I see someone reminded me to drink not too long ago. So we'll pause right here so I can scroll through and see what questions I can answer. Does this mean we will get more spooky, dark, evil, etc. housing with New Mordor? There will certainly be some housing decorations that are more thematically dark than other regions have been. I haven't actually started pulling together the housing reward plan based off of the new assets that we've been making, but we do have a lot of new assets that are coming in as part of this expansion pack, and I'm looking forward to building those out as housing decorations for everyone. Similar to what we did with Kingdoms of Harad, trying to make sure that what is offered for housing items is spread out over a variety of different means of acquisition. So. Thangdrum says, if we ever return to Harad, do you think Abanissa and Gul Sakasha are better suited as regions or as territories? I think Abanissa, there's room for Abanissa, and there is room for portions of Gul Sakasha, of the Great Desert. I think we have to think a lot about how we want to present the desert. Forests are old hat. We know how to do forests. We have built them left, right, and center all over the place. It is hard to not trip over a forest in LOTRO, and we have all sorts of variety in them. I think a desert is something that we toyed with it here and there in Harad, like in Kudzagin and some of the other regions, representing different kinds of deserts, but something that is just like flat out Sahara, rolling hills of sand everywhere, sand dunes everywhere, and basically only sand dunes. That's something that is certainly a design challenge, and something that we're going to need a lot of specific intentional thought and design behind before we even start thinking about how big is it? How much land does it cover? Where does it fit? Do we make Region 7? That sort of thing. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. All right, where am I now? Alrighty, so now we're going to blip on over to one of our next areas. Bloop. And we're coming down from Dunharrow. Going to run past Edoras on our way. I'm trying to cram through Rohan as quick as I can so that we have time for the other regions. Rohan gets half of it, and the other three regions kind of get a little shortchanged. But but yeah, it's always exciting looking at and looking forward to new regions coming up, because we've been sitting and thinking about, since we wrapped up development of Kingdoms of Harad, we've been sitting and thinking and ideating and whatnot about what we want the regions to look like, how we're going to build, even talking about like what's even next beyond that, or what is happening in between that. You know me, I do love a side project and a side project and a fill in the gap here and there. No promises on that, but I certainly keep poking and bugging people about it. Lils of Laurelin says, not gonna lie, Blackroot Vale is easier to navigate than most modern regions. I think Blackroot Vale is also very simple in its layout and its design in comparison. When I was getting locations and researching for this, I when I got to Ironfold, I had several moments of just like stopping and staring and being like, this is such a pretty simple region, and simple isn't bad, and it's one of the things that I look forward to opportunities to build simple again. But I think one of the tricks with building simple is, if we are creating new assets for a region, that kind of inherently complicates how we're building that region, if that makes sense. Because you want to use those new assets that are coming in, you want to use them well and potentially use them a lot. And so when a new region comes through where you just have, with Harad and whatnot, where it's just like we've got all of these new trees and terrain textures and structures and whatnot, and you want to figure out how to use them. And then once you've figured out how to use them, then you have a region like, the Hadakali Fells, where you figured out how to use all of these assets, and now you can kind of take a step back and say, okay, I don't need to do this much to get this look and this feel. And I feel like a lot of those Gondor regions were very much, and this is speaking as someone who was not involved in any of the development for any of them. This is from me as an outsider looking at them. It feels to me very much like Rohan was us figuring out how to use the new terrain textures, how to build these rivers and complex towns and interesting scene files and all of that. And then Gondor benefited from all of that, because with Gondor we were just able to be like, okay, we know what works. We don't have to like trial and error our way through it. We don't have to overcomplicate it. We can just build. And so that's why I feel like, while those regions are big and could certainly stand to be split up into smaller sub areas than they are, it certainly helps that we've had experience with the assets that we are using here in Rohan, that we're seeing here in Rohan, and then incorporated those methodologies into what was being built in Gondor. If that makes any sense. Dumel says, I always wondered, most housing settlements have been placed out of the way of most landscape areas. Why was it decided to drop the Kingstead fields right smack dab in the middle of things so close to Edoras? It seems to overwhelm the area. It was an experimentation to see what we could do as far as creating a neighborhood that didn't feel like it was trapped in a valley. I think the hard part with something like Rohan is, if you're trying to sell the experience of having this farmstead out on the rolling hills of Rohan, you don't want to shove that in a corner, because then you lose the rolling hills. So its position is, and I know it is divisive. Some people like it, some people don't. But its position was honestly probably the best place that we could put it compared to other content that is surrounding all of this region. This was the most one of the most empty spaces in Rohan that it could have been put in. I remember scouting through the entirety of Rohan trying to find the right place to put this neighborhood that we wanted to put out in the open field, out in the open fields. And every time I thought I found a space, I would stumble into something like, oh, wait, nope, epic story instance is happening here. Or, oh, wait, nope, like most of these land blocks have quest stuff in it that I would need to relocate. I think with this, there was like some, with the Kingstead neighborhood, there's some stuff kind of up in this corner that I had to like move slightly. But by and large, most of what the footprint of the Kingstead neighborhood encompasses was a content dead zone. There wasn't anything in it. And so that's why that location was chosen. Hirok says, since Region 4 will not go further into the east, can we maybe have King's Gondor on the map of Region 4 together with Outer Gondor? That depends on how the data is set up and what regions things are in or where things are adjacent, because a lot of the maps, especially in order to show you on the map, requires knowing your location. And so if you're trying to overlap the new stuff from King's Gondor into the old Gondor map, you're gonna have weird instances where you're not gonna show up on the map, or you might show up on the map, but it might not feel right. It might not be the right spot. Our UI does the job, but it is not a modern UI by any means, and we do what we can to make it work, but sometimes we need to be okay with things being not optimal in our maps, because that is less of a headache than trying to force something to work right and have it be confusing or not working right at all. Lils says, the housing area should have been within Edoras. Now it looks ridiculous how there's a larger town on the other side of the river from Edoras. And like I said, some people enjoy it, some people don't. I am purely letting you know why the decisions were made as they were made. I think there is certainly an argument to be made that if it was in Edoras, then content in Edoras would also be potentially disrupted by its implementation. I think it would have not sold the living on the open plains fantasy, and would have sold a different fantasy of being in a, rustic, having a home in a rustic city would be the story that neighborhood would be telling, as opposed to living out on the plains. What is this blinky light here? Oh, it's a glow. Oh, I remember building this. This was one of the first instance spaces that I ever built that then got turned into an actual for reals landscape space when Western Rohan was introduced. This was a fun instance space to build because for Moria, I had built the first 3 resource instances that we'd ever had in the game. And then when Rohan came out, I built an additional 3 resource instances. Alrighty. Well, I think we're going to wrap up our travels through Rohan, since we are getting pretty close to the edge of things here. If we bring up our map, you can see where we are. We're here in Fenmarch. We'd basically be going down to about here and stopping. So I think this is a good place for us to wrap up Rohan. Now let's head up to Arid Mithrin for some river exploration. Thangdrum asks, any chances for Ewok-inspired treehouses to Wozes? And Wozes definitely are very underserved when it comes to the assets that they have available to them. But we do not currently have a plan or intention to considerably complexify the structures that they have available to them. We're kind of making it work with what we have, with some inclusions such as, like, maybe the Woz hubs that we introduce have some elements in them from other cultures that they've kind of borrowed, they've stolen from other camps in the area, that sort of thing. Happy to have finally caught up with chat. Druidsfire says, to be honest, the big empty space with nothing in there is the same problem you're working with in Harad. I wonder if we had some Umbar Harad housing in the middle of the landscape, if the same complaints would arise. It would be different complaints, because then you would have people being like, well, why can't I just go in a straight line through this to get to where I need to go instead of having to go around this neighborhood? So that's the thing we would run into with that. At the end of the day, one of the things that a game designer learns pretty early on is there's no way you can win. At the end of the day, there will be people that like stuff you do. There will be people that dislike the stuff you do. There will be people that have deep, intense reactions and opinions on things, whether they are positive or negative. And so it is easier sometimes to just kind of be like, okay, some people like this, some people don't. Let's move on to the next thing. Even looking at the different reactions we've had to the announcement for Wolves of Mordor, there are people that absolutely love it. There are people that absolutely do not love it. There are people that are excited about neighbors. There are people that are not interested at all in ever interacting with neighbors. So it is one of those things where, and I'm going to see if I can land myself on the rush gate, because we've already looked at this river before. So yeah, it's a balancing act. All right, next spot. I really enjoy I've talked about, I love mountainy areas, and Arid Mithrin is one of those areas that always kind of brings me joy to run around in once you get up into the crags here, the high mountains of them. At least the parts that let me run around in them instead of hitting me with invisible walls. I'm an admin. I'm allowed to go through invisible walls. Come on, Glimmerdeep. There we go. Skadoosh. What we really need to do is we need to get some planes, some of these rapids planes that are actually fully flat, so that we can kind of scale them a bit more arbitrarily without worrying about getting your camera underneath them and whatnot. Making the way. Where are we on the map? So we're here. All right. This was kind of intended to be a continuation of the rivers flowing down into here and then through Aaron Lasgalen. I remember now. Druidsfire says, I did like the ore-threaded rocks in the Glimmerdeep, and otherwise up that away. The inclusion rocks were great. I think we've, for at least Heladris, We've kind of looked at those and were inspired by those when it came to some of the assets that are being introduced in that region, and have kind of taken how these inclusion rocks were built here and elevated them and basically come up with a new way to approach how we develop those kinds of inclusions in rocks. The artist working on it, she was very excited to regularly show us what she was doing, the research she was doing in how certain kinds of rocks and mineral elements combine together to make things. So like very, very excited, enthusiastic about all of that. So we're excited to show off all the fun volcanic-y stuff that is being brought in with Helidris. And I know Pearson is very much looking forward to finding some free time to bring those assets back into other more volcanic areas, aka Mordor. Right. I like this lake. This lake is nice too. So we're making our way. We're making our way. And we'll get up on top of the Oins Bridge and head on over to our next area. Head on over to, we're going to go to, I shouldn't say over, we're going down. We're going down to Northern Mirkwood for a quick run through that. And then a quick run from Erebor down to the Long Lake. And if we have time, we will head over to Ironfold. There are a few cool rivers in Ironfold as well. And so here we are at the end of the lake. There's Oins Bridge. And now we head to Mirkwood. And in we go. Another lake. See, I could do a whole stream just on lakes. We've got enough lakes. The lakes of Middle-earth, where we just spend a lot of time swimming. Thangdrum says, I've seen worries about more wasteland for Draugarth. Would that be accurate for Helidris and Parthravis, or is there more to them geographically? I mean, I think it depends on what the concerns over wastelands are. I think when people think of Mordor, the first thing they think of is just how dark it is. And that's something that we are very aware of, and we went into the pre-production and implementation of very aware of. We didn't want the same kind of experience with Mordor, because it is a region that is set after the One Ring, so there is a degree of evil energy that has since, as I'm talking and walking, but getting off trail. These are regions that players are exploring decently after the destruction of the ring. Evil is dissipated, the darkness is kind of withdrawn, and so your experiences in Helidris, Parthravis, and Nanogl are not going to be these depressively dark spaces the whole time. Will there be darkness in them? Certainly. But you're not going to have the same experience in Draugarth that you had in Gorgoroth. It is not the completely black, completely bleak. Even Helidris has life in it. Parthravis has life in it. And Nanogl definitely has life in it. So we will certainly be doing more preview streams for those coming up. I'm waiting on Wes, our marketing representative, to come back from a break. And then he and myself and Alan and Celestra are going to kind of sit down and figure out what our preview schedule and preview plan is for the expansion pack. I guess you could say maybe next Cave Troll is kind of the soft kickoff of it, but that's mostly going to be kind of us talking about what's already out there. It's not going to be necessarily something that's entirely new, though there may be new elements to the conversation that come out of it. Actually, Alta says, I've been on Angmar, so I haven't even started Harad yet. But every time I listen to you talk about landscape design, I just get the urge to go to a regular server and binge the whole place. I mean, if you've got a high enough level character and you just want to see the sites, feel free to see the sites. I think that's that's one of the things that I enjoy about our landscape in LOTRO is your access to the regions is not restricted by your progress through the game. Your access is restricted by your ability to dodge things that want to eat your face when you enter those regions. Dumal says, Ambari housing, such as in the upper ward of Ambarba Harbel, is magnificent. Are there any plans, however distant, to add Ambari housing? I think Ambari housing, the assets that are available, and the setting are such a slam dunk that it's something that we definitely want to do. As to when that will happen, I'm not sure. We actually have a lot of stuff kind of in the hopper, thoughts about what we're doing for housing over the next several years that make looking at the Magic 8 Ball and having it give a good direct answer about when any given neighborhood will become available a little tricky, because some of the things we may want to do may change what our approach in building new neighborhoods is. I'll say that. Alrighty. So we are very close to out of time. I don't know that I'll be able to get to everything, so why don't we just get to the edge of the forest, hop down in here. I'll do a quick pop over to Erebor so we can run down that river and see how much time we have left after that. All right, Erebor, here we go. Let's see. Mirage QQ says, I'm curious, how big is the LOTRO team? The LOTRO team is somewhere between not enough and too many people. We do not state any numbers related to the actual size of our teams. Alrighty. Threader says, have you guys finished working on the next expansion pack yet? The Wolves of Mordor, which we just announced last weekend, is in active development now. I actually, end of last week, just received, I think, almost all. I think there are maybe a few more assets that I'm waiting for, but almost all of the scenery assets that I need to build the landscape that I'm building. So yeah, it's in very heavy development at the moment. Mario Justum says, are there going to actually be sunny spots in the new region? Yeah, the skies will be open. There will be skies. Will they be colored in the way that you expect a sunny sky to be, such as what we're seeing here? Maybe, maybe not. we are at the point in development where we're mostly focusing on building the landscape. When it comes to building out the day files for those regions, those usually happen kind of towards the end of that cycle. And once we have a good sense of the vibe that we like for a given region, and that's when we'll like nail it. We're feeling good about how we're painting things, how the scene assets are looking. That's when things like lighting and day files and whatnot come in to finalize things. So we've got a couple minutes left. I'm going to not run all the way down to the long lake in favor of getting us into Ironfold to wrap up this stream. So here we go. Like I was saying, so Iceman was responsible for building this region many years ago. This region just makes me feel good. I feel like we've got LOTRO Red Dead Redemption vibes happening in here to some degree, but it's a great region. I love it. It's simple. You walk in and you're kind of just I feel surprised walking in here because it's got that almost lighter feel to it as you're walking through it. Let me set the day back a little bit. Yeah, it's open, it's airy. I think as we, it's almost got like a Rocky Rohan kind of feel to it now that I think about it. Not Rocky Road, Rocky Rohan. And certainly something as we start thinking about regions outside of Mordor and how we want to build them. These are things to reference. This is how we've built this before. This is what we've done before. This is what has worked. What hasn't worked. It's all of these things. So we're gonna hop down into Scald's Drop here, so we can get a good view. I remember, I didn't build this region, but I did build out the far terrain for it, and it does like endlessly amuse me, like looking out into the distance here and seeing the random farms down there, and knowing how much you all want to get down there. So Mario Justin says it feels like Ironfold inspired Cardalon a little bit. Well, I mean, Cardalon is known as the Red Hills, so there's certainly overlap in the coloration of the region. I think we might have gone maybe a little too saturated on the red of the rocks in that region. I feel like this is a more realistic looking red, but. And then we have the Red River here, the River Carnan, that you follow down through. But I like the slopes. I like how they kind of gently ramp up into the mountains. It feels like, it feels weathered, but weathered in a crumbly fashion. Like it's not just this harsh erosion that's happening that's been washed out. It's kind of over time, wind and rain and other things have just kind of smoothed the transition between, floor and hill. Let's see. While I'm running through here, I think I'm almost to the end actually, and we'll look out over the fields of Kelduin. Or I'll just run off down into here. Oh, look at that. This is more built than I thought it was. And now we're in Breland. Welcome to Breland, everyone. So we'll hold off here. I'll take a quick look at the couple questions, and then we'll wrap things up. Dodger Art Phil says, I have to give you kudos with the zones from Gundabad onward. So far, visually incredible content, being lore friendly and related to medieval type setting has declined quite a bit. The stories have been great, just not Tolkien in many cases. Here's to hoping we get back to the professor's vision and new and impressive vistas. Hot take, and I'll wrap it up with this. I disagree with the notion that a lot of people have that places like Harad do not fall in line with the vision of Tolkien. They are certainly underrepresented areas, but a lot of Mordor is underrepresented. A lot of what we've done in Gondor is underrepresented in the books. And so I think that, saying that Harad doesn't feel like Tolkien is maybe not an entire understanding of what little bits there are meant to illustrate what those regions are like. So I think like the stories that are being told in those areas are taking what information we have and trying to expand upon it. And I think that still feels like Tolkien to me. So respectfully disagree. Anyways, so here we are. We've found our way down out of Ironfold. I think we have a smite volume there that kills non-admins when they try to jump down here. So someday you all may be able to travel here as well. But until then, thank you everyone for hanging out, chatting with me, asking your questions regarding rivers, regarding Rohan, regarding housing, and regarding what we're doing next with the Wolves of Mordor. So we're going to wrap up this stream for right now. Next week, Orion and I will be in our regularly scheduled We Have a Cave Troll, where we'll be talking about Wolves of Mordor, at least talking about the things that we've introduced and made available so far. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you all next week.